The Harbor Light Diner smells like stale coffee and bleach. With a sweet layer of burnt sugar from the apple pies, Marge slides into the display case. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. This is my world. From my station by the window, past the fogged-up glass and the neon open sign that buzzes like an angry wasp, I can see the harbor. The water is black, reflecting the cranes and the skeleton frames of the container ships. And up on the hill, lights twinkle from the mansions. They look like fallen stars, rich and cold, a different universe from the docks. I'm Ruby Hale. I'm 26 years old, and I've been pouring coffee in this joint for 3 years, saving up tip money, dollar by dollar, to get back to school. Social work. I want to fix things, not just mop them up. My main job, though, that's Eli, my brother. He's 16, smart, and growing up too fast in a neighborhood that chews up boys like him. He came in about 2 weeks ago, always sits in the last booth, the one with the cracked vinyl seat that sinks when you sit down. He doesn't fit. The dock workers are loud, smelling of salt and sweat. The cops are tired, their voices rough with exhaustion. The students are broke, nursing 1 cup of coffee for hours. He's quiet. He wears dark suits that look custom-made, probably costing more than my rent for a full year. He looks about 34, maybe 35. He reads an actual newspaper, folds it neatly into a perfect square when he's done. He orders black coffee and a slice of cherry pie, and he eats it slowly, deliberately, like he has all the time in the world. My coworker, Jenna, calls him Mr. Mystery. "I dare you," Jenna whispered tonight, polishing silverware so fast it squeaked. We were in the dead zone, that quiet hour just before the sun threatens to show up. Dare me what? To ask him if he owns the hill? I muttered, refilling the ketchup bottles, the vinegar smell clinging to my fingers. No, ask him to the dance. I froze, my hand halfway to the napkin dispenser. The dance. The Harbor High Fall fundraiser. Eli was playing in the jazz band. I had to go, to cheer him on. But the thought of going stag to a high school dance when you're 26 is a special kind of sad. It's held in the gym, the gymnasium. "Jenna, that's insane," I hissed. "It's a high school dance. He's a grown man. I'm a grown woman. It's weird." $50 says you won't, she grinned, her eyes sparkling. $50. $50 is a new textbook for my prerequisites. It's half the electric bill. It's 2 new pairs of non-slip shoes for work. "You're on," I said, before I could stop myself. My pride has always been more expensive than my paycheck. I knew why Jenna picked him. He was the only one in the diner, other than the cops, who didn't look like he'd laugh in my face or try to get my number in a way that made my skin crawl. Just last night, old man Hemlock, who sleeps down by the docks, shuffled in. He was shaking, the autumn wind tearing right through his thin jacket. Marge, the owner, was in the back, yelling at a produce supplier on the phone. I slid Hemlock into the first booth, poured him a coffee, and cut him the thickest slice of apple pie from the display. On the house, Hemlock, eat slow. I told him I didn't know Mr. Mystery was watching from his booth in the back. I just saw him lift his cup. When he paid his check $12.50, he left a $50 bill on the table. Not flashy, not fanned out, just folded neatly under the saucer. I almost missed it. That's the kind of money that makes me nervous. My dad, he chased money like that. He chased the fast dollar, the easy bet. He gambled. He owed the wrong people. It ended exactly how you'd expect. A quiet funeral and a pile of debts that the loan sharks were decent enough to forget once he was gone. I hate that world. I hate dirty money, and I will not let Eli anywhere near the kind of men who broke my father. I wiped my damp hands on my apron. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought he might hear it. This was stupid. I walked over. The diner was empty save for us and Jenna, who was pretending to wipe down the counter. He looked up from his paper. His eyes were dark, not black, but a deep, shielded brown. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" My voice was professional. "Just the check. Ruby." He knew my name. I wear a name tag, but most people don't read them. Or if they do, they use it to be creepy. He just said it. "Okay." I took a deep breath, clutching the coffee pot like a weapon. This is going to sound crazy, and you can absolutely, 100%, say no. But I lost a bet. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. It didn't look practiced. A bet. Yes. And the forfeit is I have to ask you if you'd be my date. He leaned back against the vinyl, arms crossed. He didn't look amused. He looked interested. "Your date?" "To a high school fundraiser dance." I rushed, the humiliation heating my face, making my neck itch. At Harbor High, this Friday, my little brother's playing in the band. It's in the gym. There will be bad punch and crepe paper streamers. I'll pay for the tickets. It's $20. I waited for the polite refusal, the confused laugh. He just watched me for a long second, like he was calculating the odds on a horse. Then he said, "What time should I pick you up?" I blinked. My brain just stopped. "Wait, you're serious?" "I don't joke about punch and streamers," he said, and that smile reached his eyes. It was warm, but it was dangerous. It was the warmth of a fireplace in a room full of dynamite. 7:00, I stammered, feeling like I'd just stepped off a ledge. "Friday. But why?" "I like apple pie," he said, standing up. He dropped a $20 bill on the table for his $4 coffee. "And I like people who honor their debts. See you Friday. Ruby." He walked out. The bell over the diner door jingled softly. Jenna was staring, her mouth open, a dish rag dangling from her hand. "Oh my God, Ruby, you did it." I just stared at the 20 on the table. I felt like I'd just lit a match I couldn't blow out. The city's been tense. You can feel it in the diner. The cops come in more often, looking grayer than usual. They talk in low voices about the North Side Kings, new crew, the rumors say. Not the old-style families, but rougher, pushing substances into neighborhoods they shouldn't be in. There are more patrols, random stops that make the dock workers furious. The newspapers, mystery reads. The headlines are all about escalating tensions and territorial disputes. It's the kind of background noise I try to tune out. Friday came too fast. I wore my one good dress, a dark blue sheath that wasn't too formal. I felt ridiculous, like I was playing dress-up. At 7:00 sharp, a black car that looked like it belonged on the hill, not on my cracked pavement street, pulled up. It wasn't a flashy limo. It was a German sedan, heavy and dark and quiet. He'd introduced himself as Adrian when he called to confirm the address got out. He wasn't wearing the business suit, just dark slacks and a gray cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my car. He looked good. He looked out of place. "Ruby, you look lovely." "You're not so bad yourself," I said, trying to sound breezy. Ready for the gym. The gym was exactly as I'd predicted. It was loud, smelled of floor wax and teenage sweat and cheap pizza. Streamers drooped from the basketball hoops. A disco ball was leaking weak dots of light everywhere. Eli saw me, waved frantically from the stage where his band was setting up, and gave Adrian a confused, but impressed, thumbs up. We stood by the punch bowl, which was filled with a bright red, suspiciously fizzy liquid. It was awkward. I'm used to balancing 10 plates on one arm. I am not used to making small talk with a man who looks like he owns buildings. "So," I said, holding a plastic cup, "having fun yet?" "The ambiance is unique," he said, that dry humor again. That's when he showed up. Mark Prescott. His father owns half the shipping containers on the docks. Mark was a few years ahead of me in school and now spends his time managing his trust fund, which mostly seems to involve being a jerk. He was here because his family's name was on a cheap brass plaque by the door. He was already drunk, expensive cologne rolling off him in waves. Well, Ruby Hale, he sneered, his eyes raking over my dress. Working the event. Or did you finally find a date willing to slum it for a night? My face burned. Every kid in earshot turned. This was it. The public humiliation I'd been dreading. I came for the punch. Mark, I tried to say, but my voice cracked. Before I could shrink, before I could wither. Adrian stepped slightly in front of me. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move fast. He just shifted, blocking Prescott's view of me. Mr. Prescott, isn't it? Adrian's voice was quiet, colder than the harbor wind. Mark frowned, trying to place him in his drunken haze. Do I know you? You know my associate, Mr. Bianchi, Adrian said. His voice was flat, without emotion. The one who handles your family's logistical insurances? The color drained from Mark Prescott's face. He went from beet red to dishwater gray in 1 second. I don't know what you're talking about. I believe your father prefers you don't use that tone, Adrian said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a statement of fact, especially not when you're interrupting my evening. Prescott looked like he'd been slapped. He glanced at me, then back at Adrian, pure, undiluted terror in his eyes. He mumbled, "Sorry, my mistake," and disappeared into the crowd of teenagers so fast he almost knocked over a chaperone. I was shaking. What was that? What logistical insurance? Adrian turned back to me, the ice in his eyes melting, replaced by that unsettling, focused warmth. Business. Don't worry about it. He held out his hand. I believe Eli's band is starting. Would you care to dance? But I wasn't looking at his hand. I was looking past his shoulder, through the gap in the gym doors that led to the parking lot. Outside, in the faculty lot, under the only working floodlight. 4 men were standing by a dark van. They weren't parents. They weren't chaperones. They were wearing dark hoodies, and they were watching the doors. Watching us. They had the same look as the men my father used to hide from. I grabbed Adrian's sleeve, my nails dug into the cashmere. Adrian. Who are they? He didn't turn around. His entire body went absolutely still. Who? Outside. By the van. They look like trouble. Adrian's gaze flickered, not to the door, but to the reflection in the glass trophy case by the wall. He saw them. His demeanor changed. The quiet businessman vanished. The man who scared Mark Prescott was back, but magnified by 1,000. It was like the air temperature around him dropped 20 degrees. Ruby, he said, his voice low and absolute, his eyes finding mine. Go find your brother. Tell him the band needs to take a 5-minute break. Now. Stay inside with him. Do not come out. What are you going to do? I whispered, my throat tight. I'm going to make sure the parking lot is secure for the fundraiser, he said. He straightened his sweater, a simple, formal gesture that looked terrifyingly final. He walked out the gym doors, not toward the men, but angled toward his own car, moving with a calm, predatory grace that didn't belong in a high school. I should have run. I should have grabbed Eli and hidden in the locker room. But I stood there, frozen by the punch bowl, watching the man I'd invited to a school dance walk into the darkness. I had no idea who Adrian Moretti was, but I knew one thing: he wasn't in logistics. And I, Ruby Hale, who had sworn off the entire underworld, had just invited the king of it to my brother's school. He came back into the gym 10 minutes later. The band was playing a terrible, enthusiastic cover of an old 80s song. The men in the parking lot, gone. The dark van vanished. Adrian didn't have a hair out of place. His gray cashmere sweater was immaculate, but the air around him was static, like the moment before a lightning strike. He walked straight to me, bypassing the punch bowl. "A false alarm," he said, his voice calm, but his eyes were scanning the exits. It seems they were looking for a different school. It was a lie, a smooth, perfect, expensive lie. I knew it. He knew I knew it. He drove me home in that silent, heavy sedan, the leather smelling like wealth and secrets. The 10-minute drive from the school to my apartment felt like an hour. I didn't ask what really happened. He didn't offer an explanation. He just walked me to my door, waited until I had my key in the lock, and said, "I'll call you. Ruby." It wasn't a question. I shouldn't have answered. Every rational part of my brain, the part that was saving for school, the part that protected Eli, screamed that this was my father's world. This was the exact darkness I'd sworn to avoid. But he called 3 days later, not a text, an actual call. "Walk with me." We didn't meet at the harbor light. We didn't meet anywhere near my neighborhood or his hill. We met on Pier 7, the touristy part of the harbor, after 10 o'clock at night. The air was cold, smelling of salt and diesel. We bought bad coffee from a vendor and walked to the end of the pier, surrounded by water and darkness. It felt safe. It felt clandestine. We talked. Not about the men in the parking lot. We talked about Eli's trumpet solo. We talked about my prerequisites for the social work program. He didn't just nod. He listened. He asked questions. He remembered the name of my sociology professor. These became our hours. Not dates. Not really. They were stolen moments in safe zones. Late-night walks by the water. Sharing a slice of cheesecake at a 3-star diner across town where the waitresses didn't know my name and the patrons didn't recognize his face. I told myself I was just curious, but the chemistry was thick, almost suffocating. It wasn't the cheap flirting I got from customers at the diner. It was the way he'd go completely still when I was talking, the way his gaze would drop to my mouth when he thought I wasn't looking, the way his fingers would brush my elbow to guide me through a crowd, a simple touch that sent a jolt of heat straight through my coat. I was falling for a man whose name I instinctively knew not to Google. One chilly afternoon, he changed the routine. "I have to stop by the docks. Come with me." This wasn't Pier 7. This was the working port, where the real container ships groaned against the moorings. We were going to the Longshoremen's Union Hall, Local 88. I could feel the tension before we even got out of the car. A crowd of men in work jackets were gathered, smoking, their voices angry. They were threatening a walkout over a hazard pay dispute. I tensed. This is where men like my father got their legs broken. Adrian got out, and an older man I hadn't seen before materialized from another dark car. He was impeccably dressed in an old-world suit, his face creased with a permanent scowl. He looked at me, just once, with open, blistering disapproval. "This is Ruby," was all Adrian said. The man just grunted. I followed them into the Union Hall, staying near the back. The air was thick with sweat and frustration. The union boss, a big man with a face like a bulldog, was spitting. "And we won't unload another one until the back pay for containers 12 through 20 is cleared. Those manifests were hot, and you know it." I expected Adrian to threaten him. I expected yelling or worse. Adrian just stood there, hands in his pockets, letting the man vent. When the hall fell silent, Adrian spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room. "You're right," he said. The whole room froze. The manifests were mislabeled by the distributor. The hazard pay is non-negotiable. The union boss blinked. "So you'll pay it?" "It's already been wired," Adrian said. "It will be in your men's accounts by Friday. along with a 4% bonus for the expedited turnaround you're about to give me on the new medical shipment. The boss was speechless, but the arbitrator's the company. My family's logistics firm acquired a controlling interest in the arbitration company this morning, Adrian said, as calmly as if ordering coffee. The issue is resolved. Get your men back to work, safely. We walked out. The silence from the crowd was absolute, a mixture of shock and respect. He hadn't used a fist. He hadn't raised his voice. He'd used power, a deep structural power that moved mountains without making a sound. He had just saved those men weeks of lost wages. This was the gray area I had never known existed. As we reached the car, the old man, Salvatore, grabbed Adrian's arm. His voice was a low, urgent hiss, meant only for Adrian, but I was close enough to catch it. This is soft. Adrian, you give them what they want. Where is the respect your father would have? My father is dead. Sal. Adrian cut him off, his voice lethally quiet. The cargo moves. The men are paid. That's the respect. Salvatore's face darkened. While you play fair trade with dock workers, Dmitry Sokolov floods the north side. He looks at your new rules, this no drugs, no trafficking, this, no laundering. He thinks it's a joke. He sees weakness. He is moving on our territory, and you are handing out bonuses. Adrian turned, his back to me, facing the older man. We are out of that business. Salvatore, I told you, we build, we don't break. The North Side Kings will be handled. How Salvatore spat. By filing a corporate complaint, you're going to get us all killed. The old man stalked off, getting into his own car. Adrian watched him go, his jaw so tight I thought it might crack. He was fighting a war on two fronts, one against this Dmitry Sokolov, and one against his own family. The warning shot came 2 nights later. My phone buzzed on my nightstand, the vibration rattling the glass of water next to it. It was 4:30 in the morning. A text from Adrian. Stay home today. Don't go to the diner. Call in sick. Stay with Eli. My blood ran cold. I did it. I called Marge, told her I had the flu. I locked the deadbolt. I found out why at 7 o'clock, on the local news. A massive fire had broken out at a warehouse down by the rail yards. Warehouse 9. My stomach dropped. Adrian's firm, Moretti Harbor Logistics, stored their legitimate goods there. The newscaster, standing in front of the smoking wreckage, said it was a shipment of medical supplies, insulin, antibiotics, pharmaceuticals bound for export, clean cargo. The cause appears to be faulty wiring, the reporter said, but investigators aren't ruling anything out. Fortunately, no one was injured. I met him that night, at our spot on Pier 7. The wind was brutal. He looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. It wasn't the wiring, I said. He stared at the black water. No, they used a chemical accelerant. It was a message from Sokolov. What message? He burned clean goods, Adrian said, his voice rough with a controlled rage I hadn't heard before. He's telling me that if I won't play in the dirt, he'll burn my clean business to the ground. He wants me to escalate. He wants a war in the streets. I wanted to run. I should have run, but I just stood there, shivering. I tried to pull away. I really did. It was too much, too real. But then, the world shrunk. I went to pick Eli up from the public library, and I found him at a table in the teen wing. He wasn't studying. He was laughing, his head bent close to a girl. She was beautiful, maybe 20 or 21, with dark hair and a simple, elegant style that screamed prep school. She had the same quiet, intelligent eyes as Adrian. Ruby! Hey! Eli beamed, his whole face lighting up. This is Maya. She's helping me with my calculus. She's, like, a total genius. My heart hammered. "Maya," I said, forcing a smile and extending my hand. "It's nice to meet you. Maya." "Castellano," she said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm, her smile genuine. "It's a pleasure. Eli talks about you all the time. You're the one going for the social work degree, right?" Castellano. Adrian had told me that was his mother's maiden name. He was hiding his sister, hiding her in plain sight, letting her pretend to be a normal college student, a tutor at the public library. She was smart. She was refined. She talked about art history and her finals. She was the other side of his world, not the docks, not the old man, not the fire. She was the clean life he was trying to build, and I liked her instantly, which made everything 1,000 times more complicated. "You look like a ghost, hun," Jenna said, sliding me a coffee at the Harbor Light. I couldn't afford to miss more work. "You okay?" "Just tired?" "Tired or tangled?" she asked, her voice dropping. "You're still seeing Mr. Tall, dark, and dangerous, aren't you?" I just polished the counter. "Ruby," she said, stopping my hand. "Look at me. Cops were in here. Again. Not asking about you. Just asking. General questions. About the fire. About the North Side crew. This isn't just a rich guy. This is something else. Please. Be careful." She was right. I knew she was. I ignored Adrian's next 2 calls. I needed air. Then the letter came. It wasn't from him. It was from my community college. An official letter from the bursar's office. "Dear Ms. Hale, we are pleased to inform you that an anonymous donation has been made to the Social Work Scholarship Fund. As a promising student in the program, you have been awarded a grant of $10,000. $10,000. My vision blurred. It was my next 2 semesters. It was Eli's band camp. It was everything. The letterhead said the donation was routed through the Harbor Community First Fund, a nonprofit I'd never heard of, a clean one, registered and audited. I knew. I confronted him that night. He picked me up and I told him to just drive. We ended up on the Overlook, the high point on the edge of the rich neighborhood, looking down on the harbor lights, on my neighborhood. "The scholarship," I said, my voice shaking. He didn't look at me. He just watched the city. "It's a legitimate fund. It helps the community." "Don't," I whispered, the anger and gratitude and fear all choking me. "Don't you dare try to fix my life with money, especially not that kind of money." His head snapped toward me, his face hard in the dashboard lights. "It wasn't that kind of money. It was clean. It was from my dividends in the logistics firm. How can I know that? How can anything be clean in your world?" The panic I'd been swallowing for weeks finally boiled over. "My father died because of men like you, because of debts he couldn't pay." "Gambling," Adrian said, his voice flat. "No," I shouted, hitting the dashboard. "It wasn't the gambling. It was the interest, the 6 points a week loan sharks, the men who came to the house, who threatened to break his legs, the men who smiled and said they'd visit me and Eli next. He couldn't live with that. That's what killed him." I was sobbing now, ugly, angry tears. Adrian was completely still. He looked haunted. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "My father," he said, his voice so low I could barely hear it. "My father and Salvatore, they were the ones who brought that practice to this city 40 years ago. It was their bread and butter." I felt the blood drain from my face. I wanted to be sick. "When I took over," he continued, finally turning to look at me, his eyes full of a heavy, ancient pain. "It was the first thing I shut down. I broke the men who wouldn't stop. I shut it all down. 2 years ago. His past, my past, they were the same damn shadow. I should have gotten out of the car. I should have run and never looked back, but I didn't. I saw the man fighting the ghost, not the ghost itself. I can't. Adrian, I whispered, wiping my face. I can't be near that. I can't let Eli be near it. The fire, those men at the school, this Dimitri. He wants violence. Salvatore wants it too. They are pulling you back in. He reached across the console and took my hand. His skin was warm, his grip solid. Look at me. Ruby. I did. I will not be my father. I will not let this city be terrorized by thugs like Sokolov, and I will not use their methods to stop them. I need a promise, I said, my voice still shaking. I'm not stupid. I know who you are. But if I'm going to stay, if I'm going to see you again, I need your word. No violence, no dirty money, and no drugs, no trafficking. The rules you told Salvatore. I was asking a lion to promise he'd never hunt again. He held my gaze, his thumb rubbing the back of my hand. It felt like an hour passed. I am rebuilding the rules, he said, his voice raw with conviction. And I promise you, I will not cross those lines. I will protect this city, and I will protect you. My way. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But as I looked out at the city lights, I knew that Dmitry Sokolov and Salvatore Rizzo weren't playing by any rules at all. The promise I'd extracted from him, that new set of rules, felt as fragile as a spider web in a hurricane. The city was holding its breath. The quiet truce that Adrian had been trying to build, brick by clean, legitimate brick, was cracking. The first tremor wasn't a gunshot, it was a video. Eli found it. He was scrolling through some local social media feed on his phone, his brow furrowed. Hey, Rube, this is weird. You know that warehouse fire? The medical one. He held out his phone. The video was grainy, shot in a dark room, the timestamp glowing in the corner. A man, his face hidden in shadow but his voice clear and thick with an accent I didn't recognize, was speaking. The old lions are dead, he sneered, the camera panning over what looked like a table piled with cash. And the new prince, he is a traitor. He thinks he can wash the family's name with soap and water. He forgets that our world is built on respect, on strength. He laughed, a short, barking sound. He sits on the hill and trades in paper, while we do the real work. The Northside Kings are not afraid of a ghost. This city is hungry, and we are here to feed it. He didn't say Adrian's name. He didn't have to. It was a public declaration of war. Dmitry Sokolov was calling he was calling Adrian soft. He was inviting the entire underworld to challenge him. Then came the squeeze from the top. I was at the harbor light, working a double to make up for the shift I'd skipped. The small TV over the bar was on, volume low, playing the midday news. A man in a sharp suit, with a hunger in his eyes I recognized from every politician I'd ever seen, was at a podium. Assistant District Attorney Pierce, the Chiron read. This administration will not tolerate, Pierce was saying, his voice sharp, the use of our city's vital shipping lanes for financial malfeasance. We are therefore announcing a new task force to investigate alleged financial irregularities and anti-competitive practices within the harbor logistics industry. Our first target will be Moretti Harbor Logistics. Jenna, who was filling salt shakers, stopped dead. Her eyes met mine in the bar mirror. Ruby, that's him. That's your guy. My hands, full of heavy ceramic plates, started to shake. It was a pincer move. Sokolov was attacking him from the streets, and this ADA Pierce was attacking him from the law. They were both trying to force him to react, to force him to shed that clean businessman persona and show the monster they wanted him to be. I didn't see him for 3 days. The stolen walks on Pier 7, the late-night coffees, they were gone. The risk was too high. When he finally called, His voice was different, worn thin. "Don't go to the diner. I'll pick you up. Back alley. 20 minutes. We didn't go anywhere. We just sat in his car, the same dark sedan, parked in the shadows of the rail yard, the engine off. The silence was heavier than the smell of diesel and rain. He looked terrible. He hadn't just lost sleep. He looked like he was being hollowed out. "He's good," Adrian said, his voice a low rasp. He was staring at the rusted tracks. "Pierce, he's digging. He won't find any of the old business. I buried it too deep, but he'll find irregularities. He'll tie my assets up in court for 5 years. Can't your lawyers—" "My lawyers are working," he snapped, then sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It's not just Pierce, it's Salvatore." The name landed like a stone in the quiet car. Salvatore. The old man. The one who'd looked at me with such contempt. "He's using it," Adrian said, his voice flat with a fatigue that went beyond exhaustion. "He's going to the old guard, the captains who liked my father's way. He's holding up the newspaper clippings of Pierce. He's showing them the video from Sokolov. See, he's telling them, this is what clean gets you. The law attacks us, and the streets mock us. We are weak. Adrian is weak." "What do they want you to do?" I whispered, my stomach twisting. "What they always want. A preemptive strike. They want me to hit Sokolov, to remind the city, and the ADA, who really controls the water." He turned his head and looked at me, his eyes black holes in the dark. "They want me to put a body on the pavement. And you—" My voice was barely audible. "No," he said. The word was final. "I'm cutting Sokolov off. I'm not using bullets. I'm using logistics. I'm using the union contracts, the trucking syndicates, the produce suppliers. I am making it impossible for him to move his product through this city. I'm choking him with paperwork. I'm isolating him." He was trying to win a turf war with spreadsheets and labor negotiations. It was the most insane, brilliant, and terrifying strategy I had ever heard. The response came a day later. It happened on a cold, damp Tuesday morning. My shift at the diner had ended just before 6 o'clock. The sun was just a gray smear in the sky. I was in my car, a 15-year-old rattle-trap Civic that I hated, but which was all mine. I turned the corner off the main boulevard, onto the steep hill that led down to my apartment. I saw a garbage truck blocking the bottom of the street, its lights flashing. I pressed my foot on the brake. And nothing. The pedal went straight to the floor, soft and useless, just empty space. My heart didn't just stop, it evaporated. A surge of pure chemical ice flooded my veins. The car was picking up speed. The hill was steep. The garbage truck was getting closer. No, 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 no. I pumped the brake. Nothing. I yanked the emergency brake. There was a high-pitched, metallic scream. The smell of burning brake pads filled the car. The rear wheels locked, and the car fishtailed, spinning. It hopped the curb, the chassis scraping the concrete, and smashed sideways into the chain-link fence bordering the community college parking lot. The airbag exploded in my face, a cloud of white powder, the sound of a gunshot, the smell of burning chemicals. Then silence. I sat there, my hands shaking so violently I couldn't unbuckle my seatbelt. My ears were ringing. I tasted the bitter dust from the airbag. It wasn't an accident. The brakes were fine yesterday. They were fine. My first call wasn't to 911. That's what scared me the most. My first instinctive call was to Adrian. He was there in 4 minutes, not in the sedan, in an anonymous black SUV that I'd never seen before. He ripped my door open. It was bent and wouldn't open normally, and his hands were on me, checking my arms, my face, his eyes wide with a panic that mirrored my own. "Ruby, talk to me. Are you hurt?" I'm fine," I stammered, coughing on the powder. "The brakes. Adrian. They were cut. They were just gone. His face went blank. It was that terrifying, absolute zero expression he'd had in the gym, the warmth, the conflicted businessman all gone. A king was looking at the board. "Go up to your apartment," he ordered, his voice a low command. "Pack a bag, you and Eli. Just the essentials. You have 10 minutes. You're not staying here." We didn't go to the hill. We went downtown to one of those new, gleaming glass high-rises. It was all chrome and smoked glass, with a 24-hour doorman and security cameras in the elevators. The apartment was sterile, beautiful, and felt like the most expensive prison cell in the world. "It's in Maya's name," he said, dropping the keys on the granite countertop. "Her mother's maiden name, Castellano. No one will connect it to me. You're safe here." Eli was bewildered. "Rube, what is going on? This place is insane. But why is our building—" "The gas lines in our building are being checked." I lied, my voice sounding thin to my own ears. "It's just for a few days. A precaution." That night, alone in the guest room, I didn't cry. I was too angry. I was shaking with a cold, hard rage. They had come for me. They had tried to hurt me. I was not my father. I would not be the victim in this story. When Adrian came back later that night, I was waiting for him by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city lights. "He crossed the line," Adrian said from the doorway. His voice was raw, like he'd been swallowing gravel. "Sokolov, or Salvatore, trying to force my hand. It doesn't matter. They put their hands on you." "What are you going to do?" I asked, my voice as hard as the glass in front of me. "I'm going to end it." I spun around. "End it how you gave me your word, Adrian. You promised me." "I promised you I wouldn't cross the lines," he said, his eyes black pits. The rage was rolling off him, a physical heat in the cold room. "No bloodshed," I said, stepping right up to him, grabbing the front of his expensive shirt. "You promise me. No bloodshed. You don't get to become them to stop them. That isn't winning. That's just taking their place." He looked down at my hands clutching his shirt, then back to my face. I could see the war behind his eyes. The predator was fighting the promise. He covered my hands with his own. "I will not order an act of violence," he said, the words chosen with the precision of a surgeon. It was a loophole, a tiny, terrifying gap in his promise, and he knew I heard it. "But I can't control what Sokolov does," he said, his voice dropping, "and I will defend myself, and I will defend you and Eli, whatever it takes." He was gone for most of the next day. When he returned to the glass tower, something had changed. The crushing weight on his shoulders seemed manageable. "The ADA is backing off," he said, actually pouring himself a glass of water. How did you—" "No," he said, cutting me off. "I found an ally, an unlikely one." He told me about her. Detective Nora Quinn, a veteran cop, 25 years on the force, a beat cop who knew every store owner and every kid on the North Side. "She hates my family's legacy," Adrian said, "but she hates the North Side Kings more. She hates the poison they're pushing into Eli's school. She's not on the take. She's untouchable." "So what you're working with a cop—" "We have an arrangement, a non-official one. I provide her with anonymous, clean information, shipping manifests, transport routes, the real paper trail, non-violent information she can use to get legitimate warrants and seize Sokolov's product before it hits the streets." "And in return," I asked, hardly daring to breathe. "In return, she uses her 25 years of credibility to walk into the DA's office and tell him that Ada Pierce's task force is a political vanity project that's interfering with her real, active investigation. She's blocking him for me. She's giving me the room I need to breathe. He was using the law as a shield and a sword. I couldn't just sit in that apartment. I felt like a bird in a cage. Hearing about Quinn, about the schools, this was my world. Eli was my world. I wasn't a mobster's girlfriend. I was a social work student. This was my territory. I got on the apartment's high-speed internet. I called the PTA president from Eli's school, a woman I'd met at the disastrous fundraiser. I called my sociology professor. I started a community action group. We called it Harbor Parents for Safe Schools. I stayed anonymous, just an administrator. We built a simple website. We set up an anonymous tip line. We mapped, using community-sourced reports, the areas around the high school where the dealers were active. We organized a real neighborhood watch. We were fighting back. I was using my training, not with fists, but with community cohesion. I wasn't a victim. I was organizing. I told Adrian what I was doing. I expected him to shut it down. "Ruby," he said, looking at the map I'd made, his face a mask of awe. "This is brilliant, but it's dangerous." "So is driving my car," I shot back. "No, I mean it's working." He was right. Our little tip line got a major hit. An anonymous parent, terrified, reported an address. An abandoned ice skating rink by the old shipyard, just a few blocks from the school. They were using it as a transfer point, storing the product there before moving it. I was ecstatic. "We have to tell Quinn this is it." I called Adrian to give him the address. The line went silent. A heavy, dead silence. "Adrian, what is it? This is the one we've been waiting for." "Ruby," he said, his voice dangerously tight. "That rink. The Harborfront Ice Palace. I know it. It's owned by a shell corporation, one of my father's old ones. It's my property." The blood in my veins turned to ice. "What?" "It's a trap, Ruby. It's too easy. Sokolov knows I've been choking his supply lines. He knows about you, about the community group. He wanted you to find this. He left a trail. He's not putting his product there. He's putting me there. He wants me to come. He wants a confrontation on my property to make me look dirty. So we tell Quinn she raids it, and she'll find nothing," he said, his voice harsh with frustration. "It'll discredit her. It'll discredit me. And it'll make your Safe Schools group look like a pack of hysterical fools. He wins." I sank onto the expensive leather sofa. He was trapped. "But I have to go," he said quietly. "No," I shouted. "Adrian, it's a trap." "I know. But he's not just trapping me. He's challenging me. He's using my name on my property to threaten our city. I won't let it stand." "But I'm the one he baited," I whispered, the cold, horrible realization dawning. "And I'm the one he wants," he replied. I looked at the flyer I'd been designing for our next event, a second fundraiser to buy better lighting for the school parking lot. We were calling it the Safe Dance, Safe Night. It was being held at Harbor High, just 3 blocks from that skating rink. The bait wasn't just for Adrian, it was for me, too. The Safe Dance, Safe Night fundraiser was working. The high school gym, which had once felt so awkward and dim, was full, not just of kids, but of parents, of my neighbors, of people from the Harbor Light. My Harbor Parents for Safe Schools group had plastered the walls with maps of our safe zones, and the new, bright yellow LED lights we'd already funded were shining in the parking lot. I felt a surge of pride. This was my kind of power, not secret and heavy like Adrian's, but bright, public, and shared. Eli was on stage, his trumpet catching the light. He finished his solo, and the crowd, a real crowd, maybe 200 people, went wild. He grinned, finding my face in the audience, and I gave him 2 thumbs up. We left just after 10 o'clock, walking on a cloud of adrenaline and cheap punch. "That was awesome, Rube," Eli said, carrying his trumpet case. You fixed the school." "We're getting there," I said, zipping up my jacket against the sharp November chill. The high school was only 5 blocks from our apartment, but our route took us past the dark, looming shape of the abandoned harborfront ice palace. I hadn't told Eli it was a trap. I hadn't told him Adrian thought it was meant for me. We were under a flickering streetlight when the van, a dark blue cargo van with no side windows, screeched to a halt beside us. The side door slid open with a sound like a guillotine. "Eli, run!" I screamed, shoving him with all my strength toward the street. 2 men grabbed me. They were fast. I didn't even have time to swing. Hands like steel traps on my arms, a greasy-smelling hand clamped over my mouth. I heard Eli's trumpet case crash to the pavement. I heard him shout my name, a sound of pure terror. But he was fast. He'd been a track kid. He stumbled, regained his balance, and he ran. He didn't try to fight. He just ran, pulling his phone from his pocket as he sprinted into the darkness. He knew who to call. He knew to call Maya. I was thrown into the back of the van. The door slammed shut, plunging us into absolute darkness. The van smelled of old oil and rust and fear. My heart was a fist pounding against my ribs, but one thought kept repeating, "He's safe. Eli's safe." The ride was less than a minute. The van jolted to a stop. The back doors opened and I was hauled out. We were inside the ice rink. It was huge, cold, and dead. A single bare bulb high above the cracked, empty rink cast long, grotesque shadows. I was dragged into a small office, maybe a skate rental room. The walls were covered in faded posters of smiling figure skaters. They threw me into a metal chair. My hands were yanked behind the chair back and secured with a zip tie. Tight. The plastic bit into my wrists. A man I didn't recognize, the one with the accent from the video, walked in. Dmitry Sokolov. He was shorter than I expected, but he vibrated with a wiry, unstable energy. He circled me like a hyena. "So," he said, his voice a low sneer, "this is the prince's new weakness, a waitress. He gives up the old ways for this. Pathetic." "Let me go," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was too cold, too angry. "He will come for you," Dmitry said, ignoring me. He was talking to his men, to himself. He has to. And when he comes, this is his property. A mafia boss, on his own property, in a violent confrontation. The ADA will have him. The press will have him. His new rules will be a joke. He left. He locked the door. One of his men, a big guy who looked bored, stayed inside with me, sitting on a counter, scrolling on his phone. I was alone with a guard. I was terrified, but I was also furious. I was not my father's tragedy. I was not a pawn. I tested the zip tie. It was agonizingly tight. I thought about the keychain Adrian had given me, a small, flat black rectangle. A personal alarm, he'd called it. 140 decibels, just in case. It was in my jeans pocket. They hadn't searched me properly, they'd just grabbed me. I also thought about the community self-defense video our group had shared on our website just last week, how to break zip ties. It had seemed silly at the time. I took a deep breath, trying to slow my heart. I pulled my arms, tensing every muscle, trying to create even a millimeter of space in the ties. The guard was watching a video on his phone, chuckling. I pulled, pushing my wrists apart. The plastic edge bit deeper. It hurt. The trick isn't strength, the video instructor had said. It's leverage and speed. I brought my tethered hands up as high as I could behind the chair back, tensing my shoulders. "Hey," the guard grunted, not looking up. Be quiet. I waited. He looked back at his phone. I took a final ragged breath. I slammed my hands down, bringing my elbows out and apart as hard as I could. It wasn't a pull. It was a snap. The plastic tie didn't break. Pain shot up my arms. Failure. No, I breathed. Again. I tensed, pulled my arms up, and snapped them down. The plastic strip popped. The sound was small, but the guard heard it. He looked up from his phone, his eyes widening. What the? I was already moving. I wasn't a fighter. I was a waitress. I shoved the heavy metal chair I'd been tied to straight into his legs. He howled, more in surprise than pain, and stumbled backward, his phone clattering to the floor. I didn't try to hit him. I scrambled for the door. It was locked from the outside. He grabbed the back of my jacket. I spun, my free hand diving into my pocket, my fingers closing around the small black alarm. I ripped it out and jammed my thumb down on the button. The sound that erupted was not a noise. It was a physical assault, an ear-splitting, 140 decibel digital shriek that filled the tiny room, echoing off the tile and glass. The guard screamed, clapping his hands over his ears, his face contorted in agony. He recoiled, giving me the 1 second I needed. I didn't run for the locked door. I ran for the other door, the one leading to the rink. I burst through it and didn't stop. I ran into the vast, dark bowl of the arena, my feet slipping on the cracked floor. The alarm was still screaming in my hand, a beacon of pure, technological panic. "Stop her," I heard Dimitri yell from somewhere above me. I ducked behind a set of rotting bleachers. My heart was going to explode. The alarm was deafening, but it meant they couldn't hear me moving. And then I heard another sound. The main doors to the rink, the ones from the lobby, groaned open. Dimitri. Adrian's voice. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. It cut through the wail of my alarm. I clicked the alarm off. The sudden silence was terrifying. "Moretti," Dimitri's voice echoed from the high catwalks. "You fool, you came alone." "I came unarmed," Adrian said. I peeked through the slats of the bleachers. He was standing in the center of the rink, hands at his sides, his dark coat open. He was alone. "It's over. Dimitri, let her go." "It's over for you." Dimitri laughed, a high, manic sound. "My men are—" His voice trailed off. His phone was buzzing. I could hear the vibration from here. "Your men." Adrian's voice was calm, conversational. "You mean the ones at your real warehouse? The one on 2nd Street Detective Quinn is probably finishing the inventory right now. I imagine Ada Pierce is quite pleased with the legitimate bust. Or are you talking about your drivers, the ones who were all just picked up on outstanding warrants? You're cut off. Dimitri, you have no product, no transport. And as of 5 minutes ago, the IRS just froze every asset tied to your shell corporations. Tax evasion. It's so much cleaner than murder." Silence. I could feel Dimitri's rage from across the arena. Eli's call had been the signal. The moment Adrian knew I was taken, he hadn't come to rescue me with guns. He'd unleashed his real army lawyers, a determined cop, and the IRS. Salvatore had probably wanted a war. Adrian had launched a hostile takeover. "You," Dimitri shrieked. "You think you've won?" He pulled out his phone and fumbled with it. A bright light clicked on. He was filming. "The whole city will see you, Mafia, right here in the middle of your war." He was live streaming. "I have your woman, I have you," he screamed at the phone. "This is Adrian Moretti. He's the plague. He's the one destroying the city with his fight." "No, he's not." I stepped out from behind the bleachers. The phone's light swung to me. I was shaking, my wrists raw, but I was standing. "He's the one stopping you." Dimitri had the camera on both of us now, a mad grin on his face. Look, the happy family. Adrian didn't look at me. He didn't look at the phone. He just looked up into the darkness where Dmitri was standing. "I never denied what my family was," Adrian said, his voice resonating in the cold air, carrying to every corner of the rink and to every person watching that tiny, shaky screen. "I'm just not you. I'm not the one pushing your poison into high schools. The old ways, your ways, they're done. I choose the new rules." "Lies," Dmitri shouted, but his voice was thin. He was watching his own live stream, watching the comments scroll by. And the comments, they weren't for him. He's right. The dealing at Harbor High is way down. That's the girl from the Safe Schools group. That's Adrian Moretti. He's the one who funded the new lights. Sokolov is the one who burned the medical warehouse. Quinn just made the biggest bust in a decade. This guy is a thug. My community group, my neighbors, they weren't seeing a mafia boss. They were seeing the man who had helped them take their school back. Dimitri's last desperate card was a bust. No, he stammered, his power evaporating. The main doors burst open again. This time, it wasn't one man, it was 12. Blue uniforms, heavy vests. Detective Nora Quinn was in the lead, her weapon drawn, her face like granite. "Dmitri Sokolov," she yelled, her voice the law, pure and simple. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, assault, and multiple counts of trafficking." Dmitri dropped his phone. It clattered down onto the rink floor, the screen shattering, the live stream ending. He was trapped. His product was gone. His money was frozen. His name was mud, and the cops were at the door. Adrian hadn't broken his promise. He hadn't used a fist. He hadn't ordered a single act of violence. He'd just changed the rules, and he'd won. The silence in the SUV on the way back to the glass tower was louder than the wail of my alarm had been. My wrists were raw, red welts where the plastic tie had bitten into my skin. Dmitri Sokolov was in Nora Quinn's custody. It should have been a victory, but I sat in the passenger seat, shaking, the adrenaline draining away, leaving a sick, cold dread in its place. Adrian hadn't said a word. He was driving, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his jaw a ridge of granite. He wasn't relieved. He was furious. "It wasn't him," he said, his voice quiet, slicing through the tension. We were at a red light, and the first flakes of snow, fat and heavy, began to drift down, illuminated by the streetlight. "What?" I whispered, my throat dry. "Adrian," he confessed. "He had me. Nora." "He had you, yes, but he didn't cut your brakes. Ruby, Sokolov is a thug. He's an animal. He uses fire and intimidation. He doesn't sabotage cars. That's old world. That's family." A new, colder fear settled over me. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Sokolov was a pawn. He was the distraction. Someone else, someone smarter, wanted him to draw me out, wanted me to break my promise." He pulled into the garage of the high-rise. The wind was picking up, howling around the concrete pillars. Before he even cut the engine, his phone buzzed. He looked at the caller ID. "Maya." He answered it, his voice tight. "Maya, I'm with Ruby. She's safe." I heard her voice, thin and hysterical, crackling through the phone. "Adrian, no, it's not. I found it. Oh God. Eli." My heart stopped, not slowed. It just stopped. "What about Eli?" I yelled, grabbing for the phone. Adrian's face went white. He held up a hand to quiet me, his eyes locked on the windshield. "Maya, slow down. What did you find?" I could only hear his side of the conversation. It was tense, brutal. "What messages?" A long pause. He closed his eyes. He was talking to Sokolov the whole time. Another pause. "The warehouse fire, the brakes, it was him. He ordered it. Adrian," I screamed, my voice shredding. "Who?" He looked at me, his eyes dead, all the warmth he'd ever shown me gone, replaced by an abyss. "Salvatore," he breathed. He put the phone on speaker. Maya was sobbing. "He never trusted your new rules. Addie, he thought you were weak. He was using Sokolov to force you to act, to make you become him. Your father. He wanted a war to restore tradition." I just intercepted his last message. From 5 minutes ago. "Read it, Maya," Adrian commanded, his voice shaking with a rage I had never heard. "It says the Sokolov gambit failed. The girl is free. The prince is still soft. We move to the failsafe. The brother is at the high school, cleaning up. Bring him to the docks. Use the old protocols. The boy disappears. We break her. We break the prince. We restore order." I didn't make a sound. I just opened the car door and threw up onto the concrete floor of the garage. Eli. He was targeting Eli. He was trying to break me to break Adrian. "He's still at the school," I choked out, wiping my mouth, the acid burning my throat. "The dance. He was helping the chaperones clean." Adrian was already out of the car. We didn't wait for the elevator. We ran for the stairwell. When we burst out into the lobby, the doorman was staring wide-eyed out the massive glass doors. It was no longer snowing. It was a whiteout. A full-blown blizzard had materialized from nothing. The wind was so strong it was rattling the heavy revolving doors. A flash freeze. A bomb cyclone. The Weather Channel had warned about it, but no one had believed it. "Sir, you can't," the doorman started. Adrian was already on the phone with Nora. "Nora, the arrest at the rink was a diversion. The real threat is Salvatore Rizzo. He just ordered a hit on Ruby's brother, Eli Hale. He's at Harbor High. Now." I heard her voice, tinny and urgent. "Rizzo. My God, Adrian. The city is shutting down. The bridges are closing. The streets are sheets of ice. I'm coming from downtown, but I might be 30 minutes out. Do not." "I can't wait," he said, and hung up. He grabbed my hand. "We're taking the SUV." The drive was a nightmare. The streets were gone. There was just a swirling vortex of white. Cars were already abandoned, spun out at bizarre angles. The city was in total chaos. The SUV, heavy as it was, skated on the ice. "We're not going to make it," I sobbed. My hands braced against the dash. We can't see." "Yes, we can," Adrian said. He wasn't the calm businessman or the cold king. He was something else. He was a man with one singular purpose. He wrenched the wheel, turning off the main road, down a narrow, unplowed alleyway that I didn't even know existed. We scraped a dumpster, the sound of metal screaming, but he didn't slow. "When I was 16, he said, his eyes scanning the impossible, snow-blind landscape, "my father, he didn't trust me with the business, but he made me run logistics, groceries, supplies, in all weather. He said if I could deliver produce in a nor'easter, I could do anything." He was driving by memory. Not the memory of a boss, but the memory of that 16-year-old delivery boy. He cut through a gas station, bypassed a 5-car pileup by driving over a median, and navigated a labyrinth of back alleys that were sheltered from the worst of the wind. He was using the ghost of his past to protect our future. We fishtailed into the Harbor High parking lot. The new LED lights we'd funded were trying, but they were just dim blurs in the hurricane of snow. "He's in the gym," I said. They were locking up. We ran. We burst through the side doors, snow and ice blasting in with us. The gym was not empty. The storm had hit too fast, too hard. The last dozen students, the chaperones, Mrs. Gable, the PTA president, and Eli were stranded. They had blankets from the nurse's office and were huddled near the stage. And standing in the middle of the basketball court, looking at them like a disappointed patriarch, was Salvatore Rizzo. He wasn't with thugs. He was alone. He was wearing a beautiful wool overcoat, his scarf perfectly draped. He was talking to Eli, who was just holding his trumpet case, looking confused. "Eli," I screamed. My voice cracked. Eli's head snapped up. "Ruby, what's going on? The storm. Mr. Rizzo was just—" "Get away from him." I ran, my boots slipping on the polished wooden floor. I grabbed Eli's arm and physically threw him behind me. I stood between my brother and the man who had tried to kill me. Adrian walked onto the court, the snow melting from his shoulders. He was breathing hard. "Sal, it's over." Salvatore looked at him. There was no anger, just a profound, bottomless disappointment. Over. It was over the day you decided to be a philanthropist instead of a capo. You chose them. He gestured to the terrified parents. Over your blood. He looked at me, his eyes full of pity. You broke him. With your new rules, your clean money, there is no such thing. He turned his gaze to Mrs. Gable, who was clutching her phone. "You people have no idea who he is. Do you, the man who funded your new lights? This is Adrian Moretti. He is the head of the Moretti family, the family that your parents told you stories about, and he is a failure. He let Sokolov burn his property. He let his own woman be taken. He let his family's honor be turned to ash because he was afraid." "No," Adrian said, "because I chose—" "You chose wrong," Salvatore said softly. He reached inside his coat. "It wasn't a weapon. It was a phone. I was hoping you'd come. Adrian, I wanted you to see. I wanted you to understand the cost of your weakness." He held up the phone. "My men are at the docks. They were waiting for the boy. When they find his trumpet floating in the harbor tomorrow when she is broken, you will finally have no choice. You will have to act. You will have to become your father. You will have to restore order." He was recording, he was documenting his own twisted lesson. "And that recording," a new voice boomed, "is admissible in court." The main gym doors crashed open again. Detective Nora Quinn stood there, her uniform covered in ice, her face like granite. She was flanked by 2 officers. Her gun was holed. "Salvatore Rizzo," Nora said, her voice echoing in the sudden, dead silence of the gym. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, for the attempted murder of Ruby Hale, for the attempted kidnapping of Eli Hale, and for ordering the arson at Warehouse 9. Salvatore's face didn't change. He just looked tired. "You have no proof, detective. Just the ramblings of a dying man. I have the encrypted messages Maya Moretti pulled from your server," Nora said, stepping forward. "I have the full audio file of your call to the men you hired to cut Ms. Hale's brakes. I have this recording. It's over. Sal, the old way is done." Salvatore looked past her, at Adrian. He wasn't looking at a victor. He was looking at a tragedy. "He'll get you all killed. Detective, this city needs a king, not a committee meeting." He turned, and with the dignity of a fallen emperor, he held his hands out to the uniformed officers. "Be gentle with the cuffs. The cold makes my joints ache." He was gone. The gym was silent. The only sound was the wind screaming outside, rattling the windows, a soundtrack to our new reality. We were trapped. All of us. The storm had turned the gym from a party to a shelter, and from a shelter to a courtroom. Mrs. Gable, the PTA president, was pale, staring at Adrian. Mafia attempted murder breaks. All the eyes in the room, the chaperones, the kids, Eli, they all turned to us. They were looking at Adrian, the man who'd bought them lights, and they were looking at me, the woman who had organized the bake sale. This was it, the precipice. Adrian looked at the small crowd, my community, my neighbors. He didn't flinch. He didn't make an excuse. He let out a long, ragged breath and stepped forward into the center of the basketball court. "My name," he said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner, "is Adrian Moretti. And what Salvatore said, it's true. My family, my father, he was the man you feared. His world was built on shadows and violence. It's the world that created men like Dmitry Sokolov. It's the world that Salvatore just tried to bring back." The parents pulled their children closer. "I have spent the last 2 years," he continued, his voice raw, "trying to destroy that world, trying to build something clean, trying to use my family's power for good. I failed to protect you from the echoes of my father's past. I failed to stop Salvatore before he reached for Ruby and for Eli." He looked at me. "I am not my father." They all turned. They looked at me. I was the tiebreaker, the woman from the diner, the social work student. They trusted me. My knees were shaking. This was the moment. My father's ghost was in this room, and so was Adrian's. I walked away from Eli. I walked across the polished floor, the sound of my own footsteps loud in the silence. I walked right up to Adrian, and in front of my neighbors, I took his hand. It was ice cold. I held it with both of mine. I turned to Mrs. Gable. "I'm Ruby Hale," I said, my voice ringing out, stronger than I ever dreamed it could be. My father was destroyed by that world. I know exactly what it looks like. I know what it costs. I know its smell and its sound. I squeezed Adrian's hand. "This man, Adrian, he faced down the last of that world tonight. He faced Salvatore. He faced Sokolov. He had the power to start a war. He had the power to fill the streets with bodies. And he didn't." I looked at Nora Quinn, who was standing by the door, watching. "He used the law," I said, my voice gaining strength. "He worked with Detective Quinn. He protected our children. He stopped the poison from coming into our school. What you saw tonight, that wasn't the Mafia. That was the end of it. He saved us. He saved me. And he did it without firing a single shot." The gym was silent, the wind howling, and I stood there, holding the hand of the last king of the harbor, choosing to build a new world with him in the ruins of the old one, while the storm raged outside. The storm broke by dawn. The wind died, leaving an eerie, muffled silence over a city buried in 2 feet of snow. The plows, the police, the ambulances, they were all overwhelmed. We were trapped in that gym for almost 30 hours, a strange, shell-shocked community of parents and teenagers who had seen the old world die and the new one get born in the beam of a detective's flashlight. When the plows finally cleared the road to the high school, we walked out into a new city. The legal fallout was immediate, but not in the way ADA Pierce had wanted. I watched his press conference a week later on the small TV at the Harbor Light. Marge had insisted I take the week off, but I came in for coffee. I needed the normal. Pierce was standing at his podium, his jaw tight, his face a mask of forced professionalism. He looked like a man who had been served a plate of ash. "Following the dramatic events of the recent storm," he read from a prepared statement, "and the subsequent arrests of Mr. Dmitry Sokolov and Mr. Salvatore Rizzo on multiple felony charges, the District Attorney's Office has reviewed its ongoing task force investigation into Moretti Harbor logistics." He paused, shuffling his papers. I could almost hear his teeth grinding. "While we have found insufficient evidence," he said, the words sounding like poison in his mouth, "to pursue criminal charges related to financial malfeasance or violent activity against Mr. Adrian Moretti, we are not closing the book." This was his one small victory. "Effective immediately," Pierce announced. The DA's office is petitioning the court for full civil oversight of all Moretti family holdings. We will place their operations under a microscope to ensure that the new rules Mr. Moretti has so publicly claimed to espouse are, in fact, reality. It was meant to be a threat, a humiliation. But when I saw Adrian that evening, on our old cold spot on Pier 7, he just looked relieved. "He's giving me exactly what I need," Adrian said, watching the harbor patrol cut through the icy water. "He's putting you under a microscope," I said, pulling my scarf tighter. "He's giving me an auditor," Adrian countered, a small, tired smile touching his lips. "He's giving me a government witness to my own legitimacy. I can't just claim I'm clean anymore. Pierce is going to prove it for me." He had accepted the oversight. He was welcoming the light. My own life, however, had just gotten incredibly public. After my speech in the gym, I wasn't just Ruby the waitress anymore. I was the woman who stood up. Mrs. Gable, the PTA president, called me 2 days after the storm. "Ruby," she'd said, her voice firm, "we need to harness this. That safe dance wasn't just a fundraiser. It was a statement. I want you to lead it." I went back to the Harbor Light, but not to serve coffee. I went to the back booth, the one that used to be Adrian's, and I spread out my textbooks. But this time, I was also spreading out city permits and vendor contracts. The Safe Dance, Safe Night program became my first project. We made it a quarterly event, held every 3 months, tied to the school calendar. We raised real money, not just for lights, but for peer counseling programs, for addiction awareness, for a community shuttle to get kids home from late-night activities. We were healing the neighborhood, not with force, but with potlucks and spreadsheets. I was a social worker, long before I had the degree. It was strange. I was at the center of this new community, but Adrian remained on the absolute fringe. He couldn't be seen with me, not in public. It would taint the project, make it look like his money, his influence. But sometimes, when I'd leave a late-night planning meeting at the school library, I'd see his black sedan parked in the shadows across the street, just watching. He was protecting me, but from a distance. He was giving me the space to build my own power, the clean kind. He was busy tearing his own world down to the studs. About a month after the storm, he held his own press conference, not in a government building, but on the docks, in front of the massive, ugly warehouse that Nora Quinn had raided, the one that had belonged to Sokolov, the one that had been the real heart of the Northside Kings operation. He looked different. He wore a dark suit, but he looked less like a king and more like a CEO. He was flanked by Maya. "For 80 years, he said, his voice carried by the microphones over the cry of the gulls. "My family's name has been tied to the shadows of this harbor. Today, that ends." He announced he was donating the warehouse, and the land it sat on worth, the papers later estimated, over $10 million to the city. It was to be the seed asset for the Harbor Community First Fund, the same anonymous fund he'd used to pay for my tuition. It was anonymous no longer. It was now a fully public, independently governed community trust. And, he continued, Moretti Harbor Logistics is being restructured. Effective today, my sister, Maya Moretti, will be taking over all operations as Chief Executive Officer. I saw Maya step forward. She looked terrified, but resolute. She announced that the company was being re-registered. Its books opened for a full, independent audit from a firm based in Chicago, not here. They were applying for federal contracts. They were pivoting, focusing entirely on the clean logistics Adrian had been building, food distribution, medical transport, and a new multi-million-dollar division for citywide storm relief and emergency response. He had used his intimate, granular knowledge of the city's alleys and weak points, the knowledge that had saved Eli, and turned it into a public service. The system, once so afraid of him, started to change around him. Detective Nora Quinn, the woman who had trusted him just enough, was a hero. The mayor, the DA, the entire city lauded the Sokolov-Rizzo takedown. It was the largest non-violent seizure of illicit materials in the city's history. Not a single shot fired. Nora, I read in the paper, had been promoted. She was now heading a new experimental pilot program, the Community Law Enforcement Strategic Liaison Unit. It was a fancy title for what she and Adrian had already done. She was in charge of building bridges, not kicking down doors. And in the middle of all this, life had to just go on. The glass tower was a memory. We moved back to our small apartment, to the neighborhood that felt like home, only safer. The brakes on my car, a new, to me, 4-year-old hatchback that Adrian had insisted on, the title placed cleanly in my name, worked perfectly. Eli was quiet for a long time. He'd seen the man who ordered his abduction. He'd stood in the eye of the storm. But one day, I came home, and he was practicing his trumpet. The sound was clear, strong. A letter arrived for him. It wasn't from a university. It was from the Harbor Community First Fund. His application for the State Music Conservatory had been flagged. The fund was offering him a full 4-year scholarship for extraordinary community service and artistic promise. His hands were shaking when he held the letter. He looked at me, his eyes full of questions. "It's not from him, Eli," I said softly, and I knew it was the truth. "It's from the fund, the one I help run, the one the city owns. It's clean. You earned it." He accepted it, and I walked back onto the campus of Harbor Community College. I paid for my tuition from my tips at the Harbor Light, which I still worked, 3 shifts a week, because I needed that ballast. I walked into my first Introduction to Social Work lecture. I sat in the back row. The professor was talking about systemic dysfunction and community resource allocation. I looked at my notes, at the theories on the page. I'd lived it. I'd stared systemic dysfunction in the face, in a cold, dark ice rink. I'd reallocated a community's resources from a high school gym. I wasn't just a student. I was a survivor. I was a builder. That night, I met Maya for coffee, at a neutral place, not the diner, not the hill. She looked exhausted, but she was glowing. "He's really gone. Ruby," she said, stirring her latte. "He's Adrian. He's in the office, but he's just advisory. He's teaching me the roots, the old roots, but he won't make a decision. He's forcing me to lead." "You're the CEO." I smiled. "I'm the CEO," she repeated, tasting the word. "The books are open. The IRS loves us. The city just gave us the primary contract for snow removal." Adrian hadn't just stepped down. He had handed the keys to the kingdom to the one person he knew was cleaner than he could ever be. He'd made his sister, the tutor, the new head of the family. I came home late. The apartment was quiet. Eli was asleep. I sat at my small desk, my textbooks open, the reading lamp casting a small, warm circle of light. There was a knock, soft, not a cop, not a thug. I opened it. He was just standing there, Adrian. He wasn't wearing a suit or cashmere, just jeans and a dark Henley. He looked small. He looked like the man I'd met in the diner, the one who just wanted a slice of pie. "I didn't want to interrupt," he said. He looked past me, at my desk, at the open textbook. "You're back." "I'm back," I said. He just nodded, his hands in his pockets. The silence stretched. The old, dangerous chemistry was still there, but the fear was gone. It was just us. "Is this," he started, his voice rough, "is this okay? This new normal, is it enough?" I looked at my homework. I thought about Eli's scholarship. I thought about the new lights in the high school parking lot. "It's not enough," I said, and his face fell. "But it's a hell of a start." I stepped aside and held the door open for him to come in. He stepped inside. It was the first time he'd ever been in my real home. Not the sterile glass tower, not the heavy silence of his car, just my tiny, two-bedroom apartment, the one that smelled like my sociology textbook, old coffee, and the lavender-scented soap I always bought on sale. He looked around, his presence seeming to suck all the air out of the room. He was still a king, but this was not his castle. He looked at my cramped desk, the stack of index cards, the single wobbly lamp casting its warm circle of light. "This is," he started, then stopped, searching for the word. "Small." I finished for him, a small smile on my face. "And the rent is cheap, and the neighbors don't try to cut my brake lines." He winced, the shadow of that day passing over his face. "Ruby." "It's okay," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "It's my life. Adrian. The one I'm taking back." He walked over to my desk, his fingers lightly brushing the spine of my textbook. "Social work. You're really doing it." "I'm really doing it. Someone has to." He turned to me, and the distance between us was no longer about bodyguards or secret meetings. It was just the 3 feet of worn carpet separating a man and a woman who had, against all odds, survived the same fire. "Is it really?" he asked, his voice low, referencing the last thing I'd said before I let him in. "Is it a hell of a start?" "It is," I said, "but it's just that, a start." He stepped closer. The old, familiar hum was still there, the static electricity I'd felt in the diner, but the danger, the metallic taste of fear, was gone. He slowly lifted his hand, not to my arm, not to my hand, but to my face. His thumb, warm and slightly rough, brushed my cheek. It was a gesture of such profound, quiet tenderness it almost broke my knees. "I missed this," he whispered, though this had never really existed. "Just you, not the crisis, not the community leader, just Ruby." "I'm right here," I said, my voice barely a breath. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. We just stood there, in the circle of my lamplight, breathing. It was enough. Spring came. The city thawed, and the new normal, as Adrian had called it, solidified. The ice melted, and the harbor was clean. The change was everywhere. I was standing on a stage, but it wasn't the makeshift one in the gym. I was at Harbor Community College, squinting into the bright June sun, wearing a borrowed cap and gown. They had asked me, the woman who still hadn't finished her degree, to give the commencement address to the graduating class. I looked out at the crowd of faces. I saw Eli, his trumpet case in his lap, home from his first semester at the conservatory. He was beaming. I saw Maya, in a crisp business suit, looking every inch the CEO, waving at me, and in the back, leaning against an oak tree, was Detective Nora Quinn, her arms crossed, a small, approving nod on her face. Adrian wasn't there. It was still too public. Too soon. His name was still a headline. I cleared my throat, my hands shaking on the podium. "I used to think," I said, my voice echoing over the lawn, "that this city was divided. The hill and the harbor. I thought power was something only people on the hill had. I thought it was a weapon. I thought it was a fist. I told them about my father. I told them about the cold. I learned something this year." I continued. "I learned it in a high school gym in the middle of a blizzard. Power isn't about the fist you can raise. It's about the hands you can hold. It's not about the harm you can do. It's about the ability to protect someone, your community, your family without doing them harm. That's the only power that matters. That's the only power that lasts. While I was learning to use my new public voice, Adrian was busy dismantling his old, quiet one. Maya told me about the meeting. It was the last one, the real last one. She and Adrian, at the head of the long, polished table in the mansion on the hill. The last of the old captains, the men who had served his father, were there. They looked gray, nervous, men out of time. Maya said Adrian didn't speak. He just slid a stack of papers to each of them. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a contract. The Moretti Family Ethics Accord. It was a legally binding document, drafted by a team of lawyers from Chicago, the same ones who audited the logistics company. It was simple. Article 1, zero tolerance, no narcotics, no trafficking, no laundering. Article 2, no initiated violence. And then, the final, terrifying line. Article 3. Any family associate found in violation of Article 1 or 2 will not be handled. They will be turned over, with all supporting evidence, to the jurisdiction of Detective Quinn's Strategic Liaison Unit. It was a declaration of surrender. He was formally, legally, giving up the shadows. He was telling them, "We are clean, and if you are not, I will be the one to hand you to the law." The old ways were done. My life settled into a rhythm. School, the community fund meetings, my shifts at the Harbor Light. I kept them. I needed them. I needed the smell of burnt coffee and bleach to remind me where I came from. One afternoon in July, I was wiping down the counter when a young woman sat down on one of the stools. She was maybe 22, with bright, sharp eyes, and she was definitely not from the harbor. She ordered a black coffee and pulled out a notebook. "You're Ruby Hale," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am," I said, sliding the coffee to her. "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm with The Atlantic. I'm doing a story on what my editor is calling the Harbor Miracle. On the reintegration of power. How a crime family pivots to a public utility. How a community activist that's you managed to build a bridge to the hill and defuse a turf war without a body count." She clicked her pen. "It's a new model for urban renewal. They're saying, I was wondering if you and Mr. Moretti would be willing to do an interview together." I stopped wiping the counter. An interview. A model. The story was bigger than us now. It wasn't just our survival. It was a blueprint. "I'll have to get back to you," I said, stacking the creamers. But I was smiling. Winter came again. It was the 1-year anniversary of the blizzard, the anniversary of the night the city almost broke. The high school gym was unrecognizable. It was no longer a gym. The school district, using a massive grant from the Harbor Community First Fund, had officially renamed it the Harbor Community Center. It was the 4th quarterly Safe Dance, Safe Night of the year. It was packed. String lights, thousands of them, were draped from the basketball hoops, glittering like stars. The bad punch was gone, replaced by tables of food donated by every restaurant in the neighborhood. And on the stage, Eli was playing. He wasn't with the high school jazz band. He was leading his own trio, 2 friends he'd brought home from the conservatory. The music was smooth, complex, and filled the room with a warmth that had nothing to do with the heaters. I was standing by the door, just watching, when he walked in. Adrian. He wasn't wearing a suit or cashmere. He was wearing the same jeans and Henley he'd worn to my apartment. He walked into the crowded room, and this time, nobody flinched. Mrs. Gable, the PTA president, waved at him from the bake sale table. Detective Quinn, in civilian clothes, raised her cup of coffee to him from the corner. He wasn't the Mafia boss. He wasn't the ghost. He was just Adrian, Maya's brother, the guy who sponsored the new snowplow. He walked straight to me. He looked at the streamers, at the lights, at the crowd of people. He held out his hand. "Ruby Hale," he said, and the corner of his mouth ticked up in that smile that had terrified me in the diner. I was told there would be streamers. I laughed, and I took his hand. I aimed to please. He led me onto the dance floor. Eli saw us. He nodded to his bass player, and the tempo of the music softened, slowing to a ballad I didn't recognize, but that felt as old as the sea. We danced. His hand was warm on the small of my back. My hand rested on his shoulder, and I could feel the solid, steady beat of his heart. We were surrounded by the community we had almost broken and had instead helped to rebuild. It was easy. It was safe. "You know," he whispered, his voice low, his lips near my ear. "This whole thing started because you needed a date for a dance." "I know," I whispered back, my cheek resting against his chest. "I lost a $50 bet to Jenna." "I'd like to raise the stakes," he said. I pulled back, just enough to look up at him. His eyes were serious, that old intense focus that had once terrified me, but the coldness was gone. It was just devotion. "This," he said, gesturing with his free hand to the room, to Eli, to the people. "This life, this hell of a start we've built, I want it to be permanent." He took a slow breath. "I don't want to be your date for the dance. Ruby." My heart stuttered. "I want to be your date for everything else, forever." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an oath. The same way he'd rebuilt his family. He was rebuilding our future. I looked at this man, the king who had given up his crown, the delivery boy who knew the alleys, the man who had faced down his own ghosts and mine. I looked over his shoulder at my brother, safe and brilliant and thriving on the stage. I looked past them both, through the high gym windows, at the fat, gentle flakes of snow that were beginning to fall, covering the old, dark city in a layer of clean, quiet white. I rose up on my toes, looped my arms around his neck, and said, "I think I can agree to those terms." And I kissed him. It wasn't a kiss of desperation or fear. It was a promise. It was the closing of one book and the opening of another. It tasted like coffee and cold air and the rest of my life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect, and please share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us your support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.